welcome back to No Apologies. Today we're going to take a look at just one last point concerning the reliability of the four Gospels. And that is that we want to show that all four of the evangelists were reliably informed, meaning that they were all of sound mind and that they weren't suffering from any kind of hallucination or strange delusions. A rationalist can hide in the thought that, okay, I admit that these men were sincere, but they obviously must have been suffering from some kind of illness. And we want to show that there's no evidence to support that, and that really all that the rationalist is saying is that I don't see or understand how these things could happen, and therefore it's no use telling us if they did. As Radio Replies points out, that is just prejudice. They give the example that some times ago there were skeptics who said that a man can't talk to Australia from England by telephone, and therefore we don't believe he ever will. But of course the facts disprove them. What they're trying to point out is that when someone has a theory which they want to be true, he can see almost anything as long as those things support his theory. But they can become completely blind to the most evident of facts if they would threaten to upset that theory. Rationalists do not like the gospel facts, and therefore they deny them. Being forced to admit their authorship, their integrity, and their sincerity, their last resort is to proclaim that they must be suffering from some kind of hallucination. But of course, the evidence is against them in that. First point is that everyone has to admit that the writers were exact in regards to geography, to politics, and to the religious conditions of Palestine. So why should we assume that they would be any less accurate in recording the sayings and the doings of Jesus Christ? And secondly, we have to ask, are we to believe that all four of the writers suffered from the exact same hallucinations, and that they suffered from these hallucinations for the entirety of their adult lives? And thirdly, we point out that in the writings of the Gospels, there's no signs of fanaticism or exaggeration, and the records of the Gospels are very sober and straightforward. Fourthly, we point out that Christ himself had to charge his own disciples with being slow to believe and dull of mind, as opposed to being anxious and fanatical. And finally, we will point out that neither Christ's enemies or the other Jews could deny or ever attempted to deny the fact of Christ's miracles. In the Gospel of John, chapter 11, we read this: So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on thus, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and destroy both our holy place and our nation." And then they continue to plot the death of Jesus Christ. And so we understand that it was because of his miracles that they wanted to kill him. And because it's his enemies here that we're speaking of, it rules out any silly idea of mass hallucination, because not everyone who saw his miracles wanted them to be true. So in conclusion, we maintain that the gospel writers were certainly of reliable and sound minds and were informed soberly of the things of which they wrote. So now, having established the reliability and the accuracy of the four Gospels, in our next series of vlogs, we're going to begin to take a look to see exactly what were the claims of Jesus Christ. Thanks for joining me. Ave Maria.